It was the night before Halloween on the Cool Beans Railway, and all the engines were on a night shift preparing everything for the party tomorrow night. The harbor was busy too. Edward and Arthur had just finished up their jobs for the night. Edward was getting ready to go home. "Thanks for having me over here to help, Arthur. I need to go home now. I gotta get ready for tomorrow." Hold on there, Edward," said Arthur. "Spencer is at the Sodor Steamworks for the night having his brakes fixed, and Gabriel, Sir Topham Hatt, the Duke and Duchess, and some holiday makers are going on a campsite trip to have a party, and Gabriel wants you to take over." Edward thought for a minute. He wanted to go home to get his rest, but allow it, he said. "I'll try to do the job the best I can," he said. And Edward left the docks to go pick up me, Sir Topham Hatt, the Duke and Duchess, and the holiday makers. Arthur watched Edward go. "I sure do hope he does well tonight," said Arthur. "It's easy to get lost out there. I sure do rely on him, 'cause he is a wise old engine, so I'm sure he knows everything perfectly. Well, might as well go ahead and get this food to the station for the party tomorrow." So Arthur left the harbor with the food loaded in his cars for the party tomorrow and set off to Knapford Station. Later, Edward arrived at the station to pick up me, the Duke and Duchess, Sir Topham Hatt, and the holiday makers. "All right, all aboard, ladies and gents, boys and girls," he said proudly.
"Hey, Edward, good to see you. You ready to get this show on the road?"
"Oh, you bet I am," said Edward. "I'm even more excited because I haven't pulled the Duke and Duchess before." But little did Edward know was that Gordon was creeping up behind him.
Whoa! Happy Halloween, Edward.
Ugh! Gordon, did you really have to?
You better be careful tonight, or Smoother the mast engine might come get you. Gordon, do not mock Smoother the mast engine.
It was Diesel.
What's the story about him?
Gordon shivered. "I haven't heard the story either," said Edward. "Well, I'll tell you the story. Spoiler alert, it might make your funnels quiver," said Diesel. "Smoother was a show-off. He would ride roughly and often come off the rails. He was warned to be careful, but he wouldn't listen. Until one day the manager said he was going to make him useful at last. Smoother stopped laughing then."
What happened after that?
Quivered Gordon. "He turned him into a water filter. He was still stuck out behind Gabriel's pool. He never moved again. And after years and years, he started to get rusty and overgrown and was eventually scrapped."
Gordon's jaw dropped as he heard Diesel's bold words. He didn't know what to think, but Edward wasn't worried. He didn't feel scared at all. "Well, Diesel, that was an interesting story. I'd best be off now. I have to head to the campsite before morning." "Okay, Edward. I'll see you tomorrow morning. But just remember, the line can be spooky out there."
Alright, you two, enough chit-chat.
All clear for departure, Gabriel?
Fire away, hotshot.
Edward puffed out of the station, leaving Gordon with his jaw dropped on the ground. Diesel said nothing at all. He just grinned at Gordon.
Hey, Scrat, what do you want to do this evening? Watch TV? Me too.
"Hi, I'm President Billy Robb, president of the Cool Beans Railway Corporation and the Railway. Christmas will be a big year this year because we're selling off 30% of Coca-Cola at your local Cool Beans Railway soda station from the 1st to December 31st.
Oh my goodness. I would love to get 30% off of that Coca-Cola. Oh, that would be so amazing. I could definitely give some of that to my family and friends. I'm going to remind myself to do it this coming Christmas this year."
Edward rumbled happily along the line. He thought he was doing a wonderful job. The holiday makers were enjoying a nice lovely supper, and the night couldn't help but brighten his spirit. Silly Gordon, silly Diesel. There's no such thing as Smoother the Masked Engine. Besides, I'm a brave engine, and I'm not scared of anything. Steady, old boy, said his driver. This is the start of our journey. Don't worry, we still have time. But as Edward chugged along down the track in the night, he heard a whistle. Must be my imagination, said Edward. But when Edward rounded the bend, his driver leaned out of the cab window and put his hand on the brake. Edward, look out! We have to stop, said his driver. Then the whistle sounded again. Stop, Edward! Called a voice. Edward's driver shut off steam and applied the brakes, and Edward stopped just in time. Sorry, Edward, this track is closed for repairs, said Duck. And we have to work all night getting it repaired before morning, said Toby. Bother, said Edward. I'll be late. I won't be able to get to the campsite before morning. Would you like some help? Oliver asked. Yes, said Edward. I need a shortcut to take so I can get to the campsite quicker.
Why don't you take the track down there?
Said Rosie.
It's quicker and it will help you get to the campsite a lot faster.
Edward looked nervously down at the track. It's risky, said his driver, but we need to get the holiday makers there quicker. So Edward's driver backed the train up onto the main line and the signalman switched the points. Then the signal changed to green and Edward set off down the old track. He didn't like the look of it. He had to go slow. It was old and it was overgrown with weeds. I wish I was back on the main line, Edward whimpered. That's when the trouble began. As Edward puffed down the old track, the trees started to look spooky. Diesel was right, said Edward. Suddenly everything does look spooky. Everyone in Edward's train didn't even bother looking out the window. They were too focused in on what they were doing. Edward pulled to a stop by the buffers so that he could let me and everybody off. Alright guys, this is our stop. Don't worry, Edward. We'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll be out here all night, moaned Edward sadly. It's okay, Edward. Your driver and fireman will be huddled up in your cab keeping you company drinking hot cocoa. You guys ready to go? Yes, Gabriel. We're ready, said the Duke. Alright. See you tomorrow morning, Edward. Don't worry, Edward. I promise you we will be back tomorrow morning, said Sir Topham Hatt. And so everybody walked over to the campsite. When Edward was all alone, everything in every shadow frightened him. Then he heard a voice.
The end is almost upon us.
Hello? Is there someone there? Just then, a ghostly, shadowy figure of a steam engine appeared right in front of the buffers. Oh my gosh! No way!
Can't you feel it? The pain, hatred, depression, and suffering. Don't you feel it? No. No. No, you don't. You don't understand it. The manager will pay for what he did to me. After I've dealt with him, you will soon be my next victim. I will take to despair.
Ah! The ghost of Smoother! He does exist! He's gonna get me! Help! Help! After the ghost of Smoother disappeared, Edward refused to open his eyes. But he did, though. He was traumatized after what he had seen. He looked around, shivering, to make sure that nothing else was there.
Edward? Are you okay? What was all that screaming about?
But Edward didn't say anything. He was too traumatized to even speak. Mavis soon arrived, and she took Edward back to the sheds.
I sure do hope Edward will be okay.
Don't worry, Gabriel. He will be. Spencer will be out of the works tomorrow, so that means he can come pick us up in the morning," said the Duke.
Oh, that's good. Then we won't have to wait all morning for an engine to come pick us up.
Meanwhile, Mavis arrived at Tidmouth Sheds and she dropped Edward off. The next morning, all the engines woke up excited, bright, and cheerful. They were happy that today was Halloween and were looking forward to the party, all except Edward. He was still traumatized about last night. Then Spencer arrived. He had just came back from the works last night getting his brakes fixed.
"Edward, why were you not at the campsite last night?" asked Spencer. "I came to pick up Gabriel, Sir Topham Hatt, the Duke and Duchess, and the holiday makers this morning, and you weren't there."
Edward told Spencer everything that had happened last night. Spencer was horrified at what he had heard.
"All right, it looks like you need a little bit of time to yourself," he said. "I'll leave you alone for a little bit, and I'll come back and check on you this afternoon."
And then with that, Spencer chuffed away.
Edward still couldn't get over last night. He slunk into the shed. He was glad everybody was too busy talking to notice him. So Edward decided to sleep for the day to get some rest for the Halloween party tonight. I think Edward might get over what happened last night. Don't you?